They decided they'd try to evaluate this consensus by studying the view among scientists. So they collected 1,000 journals from peer-reviewed, 1,000 articles from peer-reviewed journals between the period 1993 and 2003. Discovered that 0%, exactly zero, questioned this basic consensus. Then they decided to study the same question in popular media, looking at 600 articles randomly selected between 1988 and 2002. They discovered that 53% questioned the basic consensus. That 53%, of course, is the product of the extraordinarily well-funded junk science that had been promulgated in the public sphere about the questions of global warming, that supported, complemented the efforts by politicians to delay our government focusing on this issue for at least 10 years, maybe the critical 10 years that were the difference between being able to solve this problem or not. Once again, easy public policy question which we just get wrong. Now, the point in all of these cases, these easy cases that government gets wrong, cases not just about esoteric matters like whether Mickey Mouse should be free, but core questions, the most important questions that our government faces, that our government gets wrong. It gets wrong because of this dependency upon money. But this point, from the left and the right, I think is missing the point. Because the problem of money in politics is not the problem of big government, which is the focus of the right. It's not the problem of the wrong answers to important public policy questions, which both the right and the left worry about. The real problem is as it relates to trust in our government, in an obvious way. So here's an obvious example. This is advertisement for a drug called Alteplase. The Activice is the brand name for it. This is a drug that deals with something we used to call strokes. The industry now calls it brain attacks. In 1998, the American Heart Association did a study of this drug. This conclusion was to support the drug as safe and effective, but there was a dissent. But when they published the report in 2000, the dissent was erased. Indeed, the name of the doctor was removed from the list of those who had reviewed the drug. And then the British Medical Journal discovered that the company who produced the drug, Genentech, had given the AHA $11 million, raising obvious questions. As the journalist put it, this recommendation may have been made in the true spirit of unbiased scientific inquiry, but the appearance of dispassionate analysis was eroded by large donations from a drug company. The point is not that they necessarily got the conclusion wrong. It is that money on the table eroded any trust that people were going to have in the conclusion that they reached. Now compare that obvious point with the same point in the context of politics. You might have heard of this battle recently about telco immunity, whether we're going to grant to telephone companies immunity for participating with the Bush administration in violating civil rights of all of us as they watched what we said on telephones and the internet, an immunity which hasn't been granted to soldiers, as we see from the film that started this proceeding. In March of this year, the U.S. House voted on this immunity. They voted it down. Then 3 months later, in June, the same House voted it up. 94 Democrats changed their vote between those two votes. There was only one Republican who voted against immunity, so there's not really a good sample here to study. But Democrats who opposed the immunity, 94 changed their vote. Why did they change their vote? Well, an organization on whose board I sit proudly, called maplight.org, within a couple hours was able to demonstrate that the Democrats who changed their vote had received almost twice the amount of money in contributions from telco companies from the Democrats who did not change their vote, raising the question of why they changed their vote, suggesting because of the money. Now, of course, they say it's not about the money, but the point we need to recognize is, what do we expect the public to believe here? Again, maybe not necessarily because of the money, but the money in this equation erodes the trust we're going to have in this institution. Both stories here are about the same dynamic, about the conditions for trust, about how money destroys the conditions for trust. It destroys the possibility of trust, how it has destroyed the possibility of us trusting this institution in this district. 88% of people believe money buys results in Congress. And astonishingly, as reported just last week now, nationwide, for the first time in America's history, the number of people who believe government, Congress, is doing a good job is in the single digits. 9% of America think Congress is doing a good job. And what the hell do we expect? We can't trust this institution. We won't trust this institution. We won't have faith in this institution until we can believe, as we all want to believe, that they got what they got wrong, either because they were stupid or biased, or there were more Republicans than Democrats or Democrats than Republicans, but not because of the money here. That's the test we will have in this evaluation. Now, our framers were obsessed with independence. Two of the institutions which they created, the executive and judicial branch, should be proud that they've achieved something of the independence which the framers envisioned for them. One of the institutions here has been an unbelievable failure. And the point to recognize is, as it fails, democracy fails. Because we begin to shift power to presidents and courts as our Congress fails. And presidents are monarchical regardless of the party. It's Bill Clinton and George Bush who want to increase the power of the presidency. And courts are not democratic organizations, not just because they're now populated by people from the right. They shift power away from the people. That's the consequence of this dependency. We need to fix this dependency. This is what Joe Trippi and I were thinking when we launched a project which we launched a couple months ago called the Change Congress Movement. And you can find more about this there. But I think the key that we need to recognize the fix that's necessary here is to recognize this problem as a problem we're familiar with, a problem of dependency. So think about the dependent we know best in our life. There's not one of you who hasn't been hurt by or nor somebody who was hurt by, or maybe yourself hurt somebody because of the dependency of alcoholism. I know this in my own family, extraordinarily destructive power of this dependency. So think about the alcoholic and the problems he might be facing. He might be losing his family, his job, his liver. But what we all know is he will not solve any of those problems until he solves his alcoholism first. So it's not that that's the most important problem in his life. It's just the first problem he needs to solve. And so too with us. There's no end to the problems that we as a nation need to solve, extraordinarily significant problems from global warming to Iraq, to the economy, to healthcare, to education, broadband growth, even copyright policy. But we won't address these problems sensibly until we solve this first problem first. Now, as we look with pride, rightful pride, upon the promise that we all bring to this ideal of democracy, we should recognize, we should be embarrassed by how astonishing it is that we all think it impossible right now to solve this dependency, our first problem first. How impossible that sounds. And until we make that solution possible, the very possibility of democracy in this, the inspiration for democracy around the world, will be lost. Thank you very much.